Mr. Wright, first, congratulations for your award. It's a pity you're not there, you're not here.
Yeah.
So, my question is about simulation games. So, what do you think about simulation nowadays? And if you think we've lost anything during the way up here? Thank you.
Well, I think simulation is a pretty broad thing, and simulations are kind of distinctly different than games in a way. A game like SimCity really is more of a simulation because there's not a specific win-lose condition. Those are the type of games I'm kind of more attracted to. But I think simulations are becoming more and more relevant because of the fact that they are kind of trying to take the real world and build a model of it. So many games are really just kind of set in fantasy worlds, and they don't have quite as much relevance to our real life. But what really interests me, I think, with this medium is the fact that we can use it as a tool to kind of understand reality more. So the type of games I tend to do tend to be things that are kind of putting a spotlight on some aspect of reality by simulating it. And when you make a simulation, you're not really trying to copy reality. It's more like you're building a caricature of it. You want to exaggerate certain things in certain ways to illustrate, certain facets of whatever it is that you're dealing with. So I think simulation, to me, is in some sense fundamentally more interesting than games. I think games are kind of a spin that you can put on simulations, but simulations really are a tool to help us understand the world. They're models, like the kind of models we build in our head as we go about in the world and, start understanding the way it works. We're building models in our head that are, in some sense, mental simulations.
Yeah, what do you think simulation games can take from new technologies like cloud computing?
Oh, I see. Well, obviously, we're getting more and more connected every day. So it used to be we had all these like little islands, computers, and everybody's playing their own separate thing. With cloud computing, of course, we have the ability to all be playing in the same sandbox. At the same time, I think that we have the ability to start bringing in data from the real world in a really interesting way, in real time. And so I think that we're going to start seeing, right now we have things like Google Maps and Google Earth and that kind of stuff, where we get, basically real data that we can browse very easily. I think that we're going to start seeing more and more simulations that are actually connected to real world data in real time so that, we're actually kind of playing with aspects of the world around us and understanding it to a much higher degree. And I think it's almost going to kind of blur the line between simulation and what I would kind of call network awareness. If you play with Google Maps and you can go to traffic, there's actually a little setting where you can go to, show me what the traffic is like on Tuesday at 5 in the morning. And it's basing that on all the data they've gathered on traffic statistics. In some sense, it's simulating, ahead what it thinks the traffic will be on Tuesday. So I think that, this is really in the area of what's called, predictive analytics, which is an area of great interest of me, and an area I'm kind of moving towards is the idea of how much can we learn about the data that we're collecting from the world, which is a tremendous amount of data, and then project that forward, through a simulation. And start kind of understanding, what the near-term future might be ahead of us. So now we're actually, not just playing with a virtual world or some little toy simulation. We're actually playing with, our potential futures by using simulation as a tool.
Right. So, hi, Will.
Hi.
So Microsoft has this figure of 300,000 servers in the cloud that it'll be using for the Xbox One. I was wondering if you could give us all a little bit more colour on what that might actually, what sort of impact that might have on the kind of experiences that they'll be able to provide. Simply because they haven't really done a very good job of that themselves. I mean, it sounds like it could be, quite a powerful, weapon in their arsenal in the next generation.
Well, I think, we have all these technologies coming online, and people aren't even quite sure what we're going to do with them. Software is always lagging, several years behind hardware. I think it's pretty apparent that, as we increase connectivity and we kind of change our network configurations, that it's going to open a lot of opportunities. And the input devices, whether it be a camera or Kinects or whatever, is really going to increase the data, coming back into the system, whether it's a computer game or a cloud network. So, in terms of, what you can do with that as a designer, tremendous amount of things. I think that in some sense, these hardware abilities are outracing our design abilities, and that we've only explored 10% of the space that we kind of do in entertainment there. At the same time, I think there's also this giant battle going on kind of for your big screen TV, kind of the living room battle, whether it's between Sony, Microsoft, the cable companies, that they're all seeing themselves as a media hub. And consumers, I think it's becoming more of a blurred distinction whether I'm sitting there playing video on demand, playing a game, browsing the net. All these activities are kind of blurring together, and so I think a lot of people like Microsoft see an opportunity there. But I'm not sure if that's answering your question. But as a designer, I'm kind of looking at these things, and of course, the whole mobile market, the connectivity there via the cloud. Is opening just a huge amount of design opportunities that, as a designer, I don't really feel like I have any meaningful technical limitations around what I do. I feel like I barely scratched the surface of what we can do with the underlying technologies and infrastructures.
And I would like to ask you about this single thing. I remember when I went with my parents and my brother to buy Simmer, this such an old game now. I remember I was just a kid, but I was so impressed because there was like this heavy, thick manual, like there were like hundreds of pages, and I remember I read it with my older brother, and there I learned so much stuff about evolution and stuff about all there were so many explanations about real world phenomena and stuff. And I was
that was the best manual we ever made for one of our games.
Really? I hadn't realized about it. So I was thinking to myself, since there are not many games out there, and nowadays I think there's even less that teach something about the real world to the players. What do you think about the whole industry going, Michael Bay style, and losing such a great opportunity to teach something to kids? Because I learned like a lot of things, and at the same time I played the game, and I had so much fun with it. It's like there are not two opposite things, What's your thought on this issue?
Yeah, it's kind of a different world right now with apps that you're paying $3 for, and you're having to come monetize through microtransactions and all that. In some sense, I think we've kind of lost an opportunity. Back in those days, you'd buy a game for $40, and we could invest a lot in kind of a manual, and people would actually sit down and spend, a couple hours reading the manual, which is, almost unheard of today. I think that it's kind of become more incremental. We still have the opportunity to present subjects to people in entertaining ways, but usually through smaller bite-sized chunks. Not through kind of one deep experience like that. The approachability of games today is great. The fact that I can hear about a game on my iPhone, download it in a minute, and be playing it 2 minutes later is tremendously lower friction than you having to go into a store, invest $40, bring home a box, install it, and all that stuff. So I think that's kind of the upside. I think that, I've always been attracted to games that get people to think about the world around them in different ways. And I think games are a great way to kind of motivate interest, especially in kids. As far as education goes, I really think that kids have plenty of resources around. Any kid with access to the internet, basically has the Library of Alexandria at their fingertips. That's not the problem. The problem is motivating somebody. If somebody wants to learn, they have plenty of resources to do that. But you really have to spark that motivation first. And so, that's the thing that I think is still kind of our golden opportunity, as far as games and education go. But I know what you're saying. I do kind of miss, and I'm not sure I'd call it like the golden age, because there really, even back then, there weren't very many companies doing this. But, I think that, we still have a lot of people doing cool educational stuff, but usually not as kind of deep and comprehensive as something like SimEarth. On the other hand, I thought SimEarth was great simulation and very educational, but I felt like it was kind of a failure as a game. A lot of people, when they played SimEarth, they opened it up and there were all these different graphs and control panels, and they'd start playing with the planet, and pretty soon the planet would, overheat and boil off, or bad things would happen. But it kind of felt like putting somebody in the cockpit of a 747 in a nosedive, and all the gauges are spinning, and you don't know what you're doing, and you're pushing the controls every which way, and that's about how complex the Earth is as a system. I was very proud of it as a simulation. But as a game, I don't feel like the players. It was almost too complicated for the players to understand what impact their inputs were having on the entire system.
And I have grown playing with your games, but what astonishes me with my life is I have seen women that have played more than me some of your games. And I'm not talking about my sister, but my girlfriend and other friends of her. That's amazing for me because it's something uncommon in this world with all those Call of Duties and that kind of games. Did you have in mind those women and girls when you designed The Sims and all those games?
Well, there was, many years ago in the game industry in the United States, there was kind of a large trend toward how do we get more women to play games. And you had a lot of guys sitting around scratching their heads trying to figure out what women want, which is a, losing proposition. One thing I found, really discovered was that because of the kind of games we made at Maxis, they were a little less competitive, they were a little more kind of open-ended and creative, that the very few women that were actually in the games industry, tended to apply for jobs at our company, at Maxis. And so we ended up with a much higher percentage of women at our company than most game companies. And, we chose to take advantage of that. And whenever I would build a team, I would actually try to get as many women on the team as possible. When we designed The Sims, about 40% of our team were female. And of the design team, I was working with 2 other designers who were both women. So I would always try to put the women in a higher leverage positions, and the executive producer of the game was a woman as well. And I found that, that is the way to kind of make games that appeal to women, or get women involved in game development, especially in game design. Once they are there in the design positions, it's totally easy. It's like falling off a log. It's extremely hard when you have a bunch of guys sitting around trying to figure out what kind of games women would like. But when you have women actually helping design the game, it's like a no-brainer. So I think that, really that's totally a function of getting more women in the industry. And then, it'll basically be a natural kind of progression. And that's happening now. I think that right now, I feel like we're getting very broad demographics, not just, women and men, but different age ranges as well, and ethnic backgrounds. And so I feel like we're getting, a much more diverse player base than we've ever had before. When I first started in the games industry, it was all catering to, 14-year-old boys. And so basically everything had to have a gun or an explosion. But now with all the different platforms and the different kind of genres of gaming, I feel like we are broadening out in a very interesting way. And we're not in danger of becoming a niche market like comic books the way we were 15 years ago, let's say. I think that we are becoming a broad kind of platform for self-expression, for communication, for entertainment, in the same way movies and books are right now. So this is a concern that I have, a much less of a concern around this than I did 15 years ago. Primarily because we're getting a lot more women in the industry.